Many of us wonder whether the United States government is lying to us. Is the CIA really running the world? Are we being visited by extraterrestrials? I'm going to be going into some deep questions with my special guest, Dr. Stephen Greer. Dr. Greer, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to see you.
So just some background for my audience. Dr. Greer has been trying to crack Congress open on different black budget operations that are going on within the U.S. military and the government, with information about UFOs, UFO technology, how the military is using that stuff, contact with extraterrestrials outside of our solar system, and those that are maybe hovering around the Earth. And so I'm looking forward to a great discussion. My first question for you is the United States government really spending $137 million a day on secret black projects? And if so, what kind of projects are these?
Well, first of all, just by introduction, I'm an emergency and trauma doctor and scientist. My uncle helped design the lunar module, the first man on the moon, Northrop Grumman. So I've had an interest in this since I was 8 or 9. And what I've discovered is that people conflate the black budget of the United States with the illegal black budget of the United States, two separate things. So the black budget would be overseen by the Gang of Eight, the top people at the Congress and in the National Security Council and President. These projects dealing with UAPs, UFOs, are unsanctioned, illegal projects. And that is a huge distinction nobody is making properly. So let me just set that straight. And I began dealing with this issue by briefing the first CIA director for President Bill Clinton in December 1993. So, I mean, get your mind around that a young doctor is flown up from North Carolina to brief the sitting director of the CIA because the president and the CIA director were being lied to about these projects. So this is a huge constitutional crisis that people are whistling past that graveyard. So that's, the 40,000 foot from, aircraft, look at it. Now, to unpack it a little more, when you start talking, I estimate there's probably $200 billion a year being siphoned off out of multiple agencies into these illegal black projects that deal with this issue. A lot of it is going into highly compartmented illegal operations in government, and most of it is going into corporate contractors. Lockheed Skunk Works, Northrop Grumman, General Electric, Raytheon, et cetera, and so on. So if you go to, I have just released in the last 10 days, a multi-terabyte archive that actually has everything Congress is asking for and everything that your listeners would want to know. And it's called the Disclosure Project Intelligence Archive. And it's 34 years of accumulated data, government documents. Over 750 top secret whistleblowers are in there. 115 name, rank, and serial number on the record. So basically what we just released is more than the Congress would uncover if they held hearings 8 hours a day for a year. And I've done that deliberately because the Congress is dragging its feet, and there are other things happening in clandestine operations that are going to overtake the White House and the Congress, I believe, in the next year or two. So this is why we did this, and we've spent about $500,000 doing it in the past year, and it's out there for anyone who can read or look at videos and pictures to see. There are also over 120 crash retrieval cases where these objects have been downed and retrieved, some of which are of extraterrestrial origin. But keep in mind, I would estimate 70 to 80% of all UFOs people see are made by my uncle's old company, Northrop Grumman or Raytheon or Lockheed. And they are the reverse engineered result of studying very advanced propulsion and energy systems. And the secrecy, now here's the punchline. If this was disclosed, it would terminate the need for all oil, gas, coal, nuclear power, public utilities, etc. So the secrecy has nothing to do with extraterrestrials per se. It almost has to do completely with a technology and science story, which gets missed in the cacophony of rubbish that's on the internet on this subject.
Okay, so it's almost like I've been asking myself lately, like, why do we pay taxes if they just say any money we don't have, we're just going to print out of thin air because we're going to continue to do whatever we want, all of our pet projects? Is this kind of the same thing where
Yep.
they just they don't want the utility companies and their energy companies to go away because it's a way of holding the people down. They've got to make
Yes.
those monthly payments. We can keep people in poverty.
Yeah, it's a type of unacknowledged global totalitarianism, because if these technologies had been properly developed and released for public benefit back decades ago, before I was born, frankly, and I'm no spring chicken. I mean, I'll be 69 next month. And what would have happened is that every village, town, home would have been energy independent. We would have been out of the Middle East. I mean, our national security interests there end up in being one word: oil. I mean, what else is there, right? And so the entire geopolitical sphere and macroeconomic order of the world is underpinned by the petrodollar and the energy system that runs the planet in the industrial era, even post-industrial and tech era. I mean, everything we're using right now is consuming vast amounts of server farm energy. So the technologies behind this, known as zero point and electrogravitic anti-gravity technologies, these are separate but related area of physics that we won't have time to go into, but those technologies were studied and developed and fully elaborated by the early to mid 1950s. And this is why Eisenhower was pushed aside from overseeing these projects, and why he gave that famous speech, "Beware the military-industrial complex," because of the excessive secrecy that would be a threat to our democracy. And he spoke of that on his last day in office for a reason. He was furious, but he would not address the specifics of why he made those comments. And it was related very directly to this issue.
Interesting. Okay. I've had Representative Tim Burchett on my show a couple of times.
Oh yeah, I know him. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and he recently said in an interview that if these secrets about how money is spent, the technology, the government lies, if those were to leak out, that there would be people killed over this. Do you think he means the whistleblowers, or do you think he means the people? They would take out the people in order to keep us subjugated and controlled?
No, he's referring to the fact that, for example, over the years, I've been doing this for 34 of my 68 years on Earth. And I've had 4 people on my team assassinated. I've had a couple of serious assassination attempts. Death threats are common. To get people to come forward, one of the things that's a huge announcement I'm going to share here is that I can't say what agency, but an agency and a special access project has stood up security starting June 20th for anyone who's a whistleblower who needs it. So anyone listening who is sitting on evidence, information, has seen things within corporate or government circles and wants to come forward, we can now protect them as of about a month from now. I've been working hard for this. This was something I asked for in the Senate bill. It got taken out last year. We were also asking for a safe harbor amnesty period for whistleblowers who may have been involved in some criminal activity. That got removed by 2 people in the House, primarily the chairs of the House Intelligence and House Armed Services, respectively, Mike Turner and Mike Rogers. And this was very upsetting because we were moving very quickly. The Senate overwhelmingly passed the measures to allow for this sort of amnesty for whistleblowers, that kind of protection. And it was a 6-month period of amnesty, after which people could be prosecuted. Because what we can prove, I could go into a court of law now and anyone who want to challenge this, and we can prove that these operations are illegal. And as such, you'll see in the archive we just released, there are top secret documents in there that are not underscored declassified. Now, how can I do that? Because we declared these projects illegal and unconstitutional. Therefore, all evidence, documents, material, information, all non-disclosure agreements are vitiated, neutralized by the fact that the underlying operations are in fact illegal and not controlled by the government properly through congressional oversight or presidents. Now, I have a friend on my team who knew President Bill Clinton, and after he started looking into this, he was threatened, and he backed down eventually from pursuing it any further. And George H.W. Bush directly threatened Bill Clinton. So now I've been involved with this at that level since I was a very young doctor, and it's a very steep learning curve for members of Congress. They're just sort of in first grade on this right now, to be honest with you. But for the last 3 years or so, I've been providing key information to Senate Intelligence, Armed Services, and House Oversight. But I think that what has not happened, and this is a big problem, I've learned from members of Congress I met with a couple of weeks ago that it doesn't look like they're going to get the select committee and the funding they need to do a proper investigation. So what that means is, like, the senior staffers that I've been working with, they have 1% of their time to spend on this amongst everything else, right? And you can't get to the bottom of this as sort of a dilettante, spending 1% of your time. So this is why we released this massive intelligence archive a couple weeks ago. Now, just a word of caution. That site has had thousands of bots a day attacking it. And we've had so many people getting in there that some of the systems have crashed. So we're trying to harden the system. So if your listeners try to get on and they have a little bit of difficulty, be patient. You may have to get in line because our capacity is limited to the tech that we have, because it's such a vast database. And when you have 100,000 people simultaneously getting in there, it sort of becomes difficult technically. But we're working to make that better, but it's an expensive process. And we have launched a crowdfunding project to support that so we can make it and improve it.
Okay, great. I'll put a link to that down below. Now, you've mentioned Bill Clinton. Have you and your team basically brought every single president since Bill Clinton up to date on what's going on with these black projects and UFO and things like that?
Yes, I've prepared a presidential briefing document for every president since Bill Clinton. And, some have been more open to it than others. I think the problem is, and here, this is sort of get your mind around this. When a president makes inquiries into this, they're either told nothing or they're told lies. Now, I know Mr. Trump and Mr. Pence were provided false information to manipulate them into certain decisions. So was Ronald Reagan. Other presidents have been told virtually nothing. Others have been threatened. Jimmy Carter, way before my time, we know for a fact was threatened when he made inquiries about this during the transition from when he got elected to when he took office. And so he asked about it because I have, it's in the archive, President Carter, when he was governor of Georgia's report of seeing one of these objects outside Fort Benning, zipping around, moving in an erratic way that no normal aircraft can move. And he made a formal report and signed it, Governor Jimmy Carter. His campaign in 1976 was to disclose all this information, and he was sat down hard and told, no, you won't. So one of the things he said at a meeting was, when someone said, what is it like to be the most powerful man in the world? He says, well, I wasn't that man. And people giggled. He thought he was joking. And he said, no, there were things I wasn't allowed to know about. And someone said, oh, you mean things like UFOs? And he said, yes, that and more. So this is, let's just call this the largest criminal organization on the planet behind this sort of cartel of technologies and information being kept secret that, frankly, if it came out in 20 years, I mean, well within maybe my lifespan, but certainly yours, there would be no poverty or pollution on the planet, but enormous abundance. But the super elite sitting at the top of that pyramid of geopolitical and financial power, that's going to dissipate and go back to the people, power to the people, as it were. So, which is very Jeffersonian and American, that it should be that way, the interests of the people. But the power of these groups, and you cannot underestimate the technologies they have. Imagine spending, we're estimating between $8 and $20 trillion since the 1940s studying this stuff with some of the most brilliant, I'd say the highest IQ scientists I have ever met, working underground bases in SCIFs, secure compartmented information facilities. And the technologies this group has are fearsome and can be weaponized, have been weaponized. And this brings us to another question. Everybody talks about, and some of the whistleblowers last summer talked about these objects that they saw, right, zipping around, like the pilots off the coast of California. I've spoken to Mr. Fravor and others. I knew Mr. Grusch before he came forward, and his boss and people in the Senate Intelligence Armed Services were the people I was providing information to that then gave him the ability to go and find this information out. But what they all ran into and discovered is that these projects, and they don't, I would say most pilots would not know this. Most of the things that they came across weren't extraterrestrial in origin. They were ours. And frankly, that is a bigger secret than the fact that we're not alone in the universe. I think anybody with 2 brain cells firing realize we're not alone in the universe. The question is, can they get from there to here? Well, not with 20th century physics, but with the physics they have, where you bend space-time. And to make this a really easy image, imagine having gravity control, gravity wave control, and electromagnetic field control, where, you know, space, to look at it, is like a line from one star system to another. Well, think of it as a piece of paper you bend and fold, and they come together. So you have, you're bending space-time. So the physics behind this is also understood, by the way, and that would create a whole different civilization here. The bad news is that the worst sort of folks imaginable are sitting with those technologies and can stage false events. For example, you Google this that you come across immediately, alien abductions and alien mutilations. That's been us doing that. Those are not extraterrestrials. They have no need to do that. It's ludicrous. But I know the people, literally I have whistleblowers who have operated those systems, right? So I think one of the problems is, to what end? You know, I think they want to try to control not just the American people, but eventually the world under some kind of dystopian, unified world, but based on a militaristic approach to this, rather than one that would lead to peace, prosperity, et cetera, and so on. And that's why the fear-mongering is so powerful. And that is the kind of disinformation that was presented to Mr. Trump and Mr. Pence. I know for a fact, because one of Mr. Pence's family's close friends is on my team. So I think that what we find with this is that a little knowledge is a very dangerous thing. And the more I deal with members of Congress, I'm sitting here in Washington right now, looking at the White House, right there, but in my place here. And I think what I've discovered is we need this intelligence archive we put out. Now, it's a hell of a lot of material to go through, my friend, but and it needs to be better refined and organized, because we did it quickly with 1.5 staff members. I mean, and it was a Promethean undertaking, but it's out there, and so anyone, and it's searchable. It's word searchable. It's category searchable. So I would say people who want to get to the bottom of this, they can do it now, and everything you would ever need to know really is in there.
Do you think that this information is purposely withheld from members of Congress because they would want oversight on those budgets and the projects, or is it because the military industrial complex doesn't want it leaked to our enemies that we have advanced technology? Why the secrecy from sworn-in members of Congress?
Well, because the people who control this information don't trust them. It's that simple. And they want to control it. Now, I will say that the energy technologies should have come out decades ago, probably when Tesla was around. Tesla understood a lot of this, and his materials were confiscated. As you know, when he died, the FBI broke into his apartment and stole 24 trunks of secret papers. How do I know that? Go to my archive, you'll see the document that proves it. A demand letter from the Department of Defense to the FBI demanding they turn those materials over. It's in the archive. So now, the things that fly, yes, that is a valid national security problem. You do not want a terrorist in Tehran with the ability to send a payload or a dirty bomb over Washington, D.C. in 30 to 40 seconds, right? That's what we're talking about, this kind of propulsion and speed through space and or airspace even. So some of the technologies should be secret. Many of them should not. And so that's not a decision for a group of people that are tied into cartels of financial and other power. That's something for the people and the people's representatives to decide. But that has not happened either. That's why, see, Eisenhower was inclined to A, make peaceful contact with these civilizations, and B, move towards a peace dividend for the aspects of these technologies that would benefit Americans and humanity. He got shut out for that reason. They didn't want him to do that. So Jack Kennedy was killed over this, and I will say that as a fact. By the way, so was Marilyn Monroe. You doubt it? Go look at the CIA document I got. Someone stole from the vault. That is top secret. It's never been declassified. It's in the archive. And she was threatening to hold a press conference about this because she learned of it in pillow talk from Kennedy. And James Jesus Angleton III signed essentially her death warrant. And he was a fanatical mole hunter and leak stopper at the CIA back in the early 60s. So look, everything people can imagine is in this archive, and it's there for free. You have to register and stuff because we don't want a million bots getting in there and hacking the database. But it's free for everybody. And we've done this as a gift to humanity. Hopefully people will avail themselves of it. I always say, don't take my word for it. We have hundreds of top secret, credible whistleblowers with their credentials. We have, I think, 155 black sites on the map and listed where these materials were stored, including the ET craft, our own craft, the extraterrestrial bodies, where they're stored. We have all this. Now you have it.
Okay. Wow. Okay. That's what a gift. Last year, probably the topic that was getting a lot of attention and the person was this whistleblower, David Grusch. How much of what he shared with Congress is true? How much of it is false information fed to him that he believes is true?
Good question. The essentials that he shared was true. And that is that there are covert programs. There have been people who have been killed. He mentioned that. They're dealing with very advanced reverse engineered technologies of non-human intelligence that we've studied. The part that he later started sharing that was false, because he fell into the hands of a master disinformation agent named Luis Elizondo, and is the things that deal with evil aliens blowing up villages in Peru or, where it was in South America and Africa. So, and remember, Mr. Grusch was investigating this, but was not a primary witness. What I'm trying to get Congress to do is subpoena, at least gave them a list of 23 top direct. One of them is the former chairman of a major corporation, of Fortune 50 company, who has documents and information, but he and his whole family have been threatened since he reached out to me about a year ago. So what we need are people who are, I have debriefed over 1,000 of these men and women. But what we need is not people, no offense to Mr. Grusch, who are secondhand, who heard this. We need the people who he actually met with and that I've met with, because those are direct people. And many of them do have material or documents, but they need to be, many of them are going to have to be subpoenaed. And they're going to need to be protected. Now, the protection independent of the Congress or the White House is being stood up, as I mentioned, June 20th. Now, I can't control what the Congress does for authorizing a select committee that's properly funded with an investigatory team and subpoena power. So far, what Mr. Burchett and others have wanted to do, they do not have subpoena power, and that is going to greatly limit what they can do, because the most high value whistleblowers are going to require a subpoena. And this includes people who are on the management committee running these illegal operations, and I know who a number of them are. A couple of them I've met with. So this gets into some really complex issues, and I believe that's why there are always a few control points in the Congress that are on the payroll or receive huge amounts of money from these bad actors who stop that kind of legislation. And unfortunately, I think that's what happened in December when the National Defense Authorization Act was gutted from what the Senate had and went to reconciliation between the House and the Senate. Mr. Turner and Mr. Rogers of Intelligence and Armed Services in the House helped make sure that was out. And of course, you know, if you look at Mr. Turner's home district, it's where Wright-Patterson Air Force Base is. And Wright-Patterson in Dayton is where some of the original materiel from the 40s was taken. And it's still a very classified area that has extraterrestrial material, but also very advanced programs studying the science and technology. So, and Lockheed and other big contractors, Lockheed Skunk Works, Northrop, Raytheon, part of Boeing, others, make sure that they have their guys in key places scattered throughout government to divert or to provide false information. So disinformation is probably more valuable than flat out stopping something, because you basically misdirect people down a rabbit hole that goes nowhere. And I think that is unfortunately what's happened to members of Congress. And I know that every president that I know about since I've been on the stage doing this for 34 years. Yeah.
Yesterday, I thought of you, not even this interview, but just I was eating tacos at Del Taco, listening to a podcast with Jordan Peterson. And he said one of the greatest things that would lift humanity right now would be more affordable energy.
Yep.
And it made me think of your documentary about the lost century. Tell my viewers about that, and then I'll put a link so people can go see that.
Well, yes. I mean, we did a documentary. It came out in the last year called The Lost Century, and it documents 100 years of technologies that have been either acquired by corporations and put on a black shelf and not released, or been hit with what are a criminal use of the national security provisions of patent law and intellectual property law. And this goes all the way back to the early 20th century. I mean, people forget Tesla had a real Tesla car, not a fake one that has to be plugged in like the ones that Tesla company's making now. It would have one little battery. It had an antenna on it, was pulling electromagnetic energy from around it and rectifying it and running. And JP Morgan told Tesla, we can't put a meter on that. It's not going to come out. So we could have had in fact, the head of this big corporation was come forward, flat out said, the entire world could be running on, quote, free energy, not low cost, free energy. Something that would look smaller than your heat pump would run your house or your building, or a smaller electromagnetic generator would run your car with never needing to be plugged in. Now, that sounds like a myth, an urban myth. It's not, but that's the heart of the UFO secrecy. It's, I always, some of the meetings I go to, because sometimes I'll only have like half an hour with someone in the Senate or whoever. I'll go, look at this video. And you look at the video of that Tic Tac, that thing zipping around off the coast of California. That's an alternative energy and propulsion device. There's no heat signature. There's no rockets. There's no nuclear power plant. There's no jets. There's no gasoline, nothing. How is it running? How? We know how it is. Those technologies come out, and not only do you eliminate poverty and pollution, but you would potentiate the growth and abundance globally. 8 billion people. Remember, 3 billion of our 8 billion people on the planet don't even have energy to cook their food. They're cutting down brush and stuff. So I think that this is like the central problem. And you hit the nail on the head, that if we could fix that problem, there are 1,000 other ones that would be remediated, if not completely fixed. But you're talking about more than $1,000 trillion in assets becoming redundant, like a royal typewriter or a horse and buggy, right? So we're talking about an enormous problem. And this part of the problem never really gets discussed. People stick on the phenomenon, and they're not looking at what's behind the secrecy, what's behind the font, how does that thing move, and why is that significant? Well, when you figure that out, and it's science, I know we're not a particularly scientific culture right now, but when you figure that out, what happens is that then all the dots start being connected. You go, oh my God, when I briefed the Minister of Defense for Canada, the former Paul Hellyer, he didn't understand what was behind the secrecy because he tried to find out about this as MOD head in Canada, and he was brushed off. And when I explained this, because he had had training as an economics guy in macroeconomic theory, he says, oh, now that makes sense. So that is the big part of the secret right there.
Yeah, I mean, like I've seen documentaries where like people are still like they'll melt like a milk jug or a grocery sack over brush to get it going, and then they'll cook over this, plastic polluted fire,
right?
And then we wonder why they're sick and dying early. But one question I wanted to ask you, Dr. Greer, is okay. I know you mentioned that a lot of the technology out there is actually us. It's not UFO outside the solar system, but any technology that we might have, is that, let me see how to put this. Is any of that like ancient, like let's say older than the story of Moses or something, and we've discovered it and we've tried to reverse engineer it? Or is most of it like, hey, it crashed in the 40s, even though it's advanced technology, it's still new to planet Earth? Does that make sense?
It's both. I have a guy I work with who's down near the Redstone Arsenal in Alabama, near Huntsville, and he works for a company under a CIA contract. And periodically, they bring to him, this guy's a genius of physics and engineering, and they'll bring to him some ancient artifact they have found at the bottom of the ocean or in some site. That clearly was a technological device from hundreds of thousands of years ago, way before recorded history. And he'll figure out how it might have worked and what it did. So yes, that is true. But that, I would say, in terms of the additive value of that to the constellation of technologies that we have in covert programs, it'd be a minor part, but it does happen. Absolutely, it does.
Okay. Now, is most of the this is like what I'm trying to understand is, does the government allow this mystery or romance or intrigue about little gray men running around to be the umbrella or the cover under which they secretly build technology and withhold those advancements from the general population?
Yeah, well, not the government, but these covert illegal government operations and corporate programs, yes. I mean, back in the 90s, I began to meet men who were put on man-made UFOs to go and appear to be those kind of aliens and then abduct, people like Betty and Barney Hill, that abduction case from the late 50s, early 60s. That was us. That was an extraterrestrial. And yeah, I mean, some of this is shocking stuff, but why? Because it gives cover to things that they can't hide. Because some of these test platforms get seen. It's great for them to convince the people who accidentally saw it was alien when it was ours. Now, this is not to say that there aren't actual extraterrestrial biological entities. EBENs is what we call them. And I know that for a fact. I have photos of them. I have a photo of one that had been dissected in the 1920s. It's in the archive. On a slab with some doctors and look like some suits. They're dissecting this creature. And it came from a very interesting source. A woman whose grandmother had worked at Los Alamos and on the first atomic bomb, and then was at Roswell when that event happened. And it was part of an archive brought in because the crashed objects there had bodies that they thought if they had these, they could figure out what these new ones were. So this goes back a very long time. I mean, we know that had to have been most likely a crash retrieval in the 20s. But how is that happening? Now let's get to this. And this is a very big problem. Everyone knows what an electromagnetic pulse is from an atomic explosion. What people don't know, there's a component of it that's scalar. And scalar waves, if you study what Tesla began to elaborate 20s, 30s, and 40s, a normal wavelength of light is like this, or electromagnetic. These go out as a point, multiples of the speed of light. And when we detonate the first atomic bomb, that scalar wave disrupts, kind of tears the fabric of the trans-dimensional physics of the universe, including extraterrestrial communication and travel. So they showed up in numbers. This is why you hear about all these ET incursions into our nuclear weapons and atomic energy areas and processing areas. And it was for a very good reason, because these primitive primates known as Homo sapiens on Earth were playing with something that they didn't even know what they were playing with, right? And now look where we are, on the brink of World War III, potentially, with atomic weapons, nuclear weapons all over the planet. But that scalar component has been weaponized and then turned into, through an electromagnetic pulse generators that are fixed and portable, to target ET craft and hit them and disable them. So does it happen every day? No, but in September, I was over 2 black sites out in the desert out west by a man who is cooperating with us, who's read in at a very high level of these illegal operations and who wants to defect in a classified chopper. And I hovered, I have this, and I think it's in our archive, over the opening where the Lockheed Skunk Works have an opening in the desert that comes up, and where these objects come up, float out over some diamonds that are on a runway. It looks like a runway, it isn't. And then they hit it with these electromagnetic scalar weapons to see how sturdy our man-made ones are. But those same systems, at one of the sites I was over, this gentleman who's extremely high up said that they knocked down 1 or 2 ET craft a year at that one site. I went over 2 sites per year. So when we have in our archive 120, 30 crash retrieval documented cases, that's the tip of the iceberg. There have probably been well over 1,000. And this is a problem, because if these civilizations were hostile, God help us, we would have had our clock cleaned in 1945. And this civilization would have been brought to a halt. But how far can we have an unsupervised group of megalomaniacs using those kinds of technologies against extremely advanced civilizations, right? And not have pushback? So their largesse and patience may be limited. So I think that getting this under control, this was the subject of the briefing I did for the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, General Patrick Hughes, a 3-star, way back in 1999. But when he made inquiries into this, he was told to go jump in a lake. And Admiral Tom Wilson, who I briefed 2 years earlier, who is the head of intelligence for the Joint Chiefs of Staff, when I briefed him, prior to that, I had sent him a top secret document that was not declassified, and it had the code names and project code numbers. That's in the archive from Nellis Air Force Base, so-called Area 51, back in 91. I think the document is 1991. It's a National Reconnaissance Office document, which is the super secret spy satellite entity. And he made some inquiries and was basically threatened. He was personally threatened. He was threatened with demotion, taking a star off his lapel, because they said, you are not to look into this. Now remember, this is J2, the head of intelligence for the Joint Chiefs of Staff of the Pentagon. So the other mistake everyone assumes is that you're a 3-star, 4-star, this position in the Pentagon, you have an all-access pass. You do not. This system is so broken. Our constitutional legal system has been utterly subverted by this organization, known as the Majority Joint Intelligence Committee, MAJIC, MAJIC, which, by the way, is one of the names on this distribution list of this NRO document. So, it's all in there. And I've spent probably $20 to $25 million over the last 34 years accumulating this. I hope people enjoy it and can contribute to the site so we can keep it open and free. By the way, we're incurring tens of thousands of dollars a month just in usage for that. So we need people to help support that, or we're going to have to put a paywall up, which I don't want to do. I want to keep it open and free for every citizen on the planet.
Cool. I'll make sure to put a link down below. Just in the limited time that we have left,
Sure.
You had mentioned Roswell. I read on your Twitter that it's no coincidence that outside entities were curious or interested in Roswell, because at the time it happened to be where the only airplanes in the military that were equipped with nuclear weapons were stored. Can you elaborate on that?
Yes, and this gets back to what I just said, that these extraterrestrial civilizations are extremely worried that we could go from where we are now to being out in space, but still violent and not civilized. A level 1 civilization, as has been described by Michikaku and others, is that we're not destroying the planet, we're peaceful and living peacefully together. Well, we're a level 0 civilization. We're not there yet. I mean, look at the Middle East, right? So, or our politics, or the streets, or the violence on the streets of Washington right here. I heard gunfire from my place the other day, sitting up here on my roof. So what I think people need to understand is they're very concerned that when we started down that path of actually developing world-destroying weapons, right? And our technology had gone ahead of our, shall I say, spiritual and social evolution. That's when a civilization can terminate itself. But they can also be an existential threat to other worlds out there, right? Out in the universe. So I think this is, people don't think about this because we're kind of a narcissistic society, and we don't look at this through the eyes of another civilization looking at the Earth in the last 100 years or so. So that's why when, there were all those objects there. Now, we also have an FBI document, a field agent to J. Edgar Hoover, about what happened in Roswell. And it states that apparently those were downed by a new, quote, radar system that had been installed that got switched on. Now, radar is often used in these covert programs as a euphemism for both a tracking system but an active weapon system using a scalar or electromagnetic beam. And that is what happened. They didn't come all through interstellar space and couldn't navigate an electrical storm in New Mexico in the summer. This is nonsense. They were hit, and they were there because we had, at that time in 1947, it was literally the only place on the surface of the Earth that had atomic bombs.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, final question. This one's kind of personal. I'm in Utah. Mm-hmm. Within 30 minutes, I can get to Kennecott Mine, Northrop Grumman, Hercules, some of the other places where they were testing weapons and nuclear technology.
Right.
Did Utah play a part in some of these covert operations and building the weapons that you're talking about?
Oh, absolutely. And I would say one of the most important state-of-the-art covert facilities related to this subject is in Utah at the Dugway Proving Grounds. But it's a vast underground facility. If you get in our archive, you will see a map, and then you will also see links to witness testimony and artist renditions of facilities all over the United States and the world. But the Dugway one is very specific, and it's out in you can look it up, the Dugway Proving Grounds. And absolutely, that is a key facility. And I have whistleblowers who have worked for contractors there who have given us some very important information that we've just released in the archive.
Okay, I'm gonna go look that up, because I drive past them and I'm like,
yeah,
like there's weird terrain where these places are. Like like they're testing stuff underground.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
I always thought maybe it was engines or explosions or something.
Well, here's a hint. Nothing really important is on the surface of the Earth. It's underground in a dome, a deep underground military base, they're called, or in tunnels that connect from one to the other. You can go underground near Edwards and surface at Nellis out in Nevada and never get above the surface.
Wow.
I know the contractors who have built those facilities.
I mean, this is a terrible situation, the Israel-Gaza war, but just in the last 48 hours, they found 50 or more tunnels so big that trucks can drive through them.
Sure.
So, I mean, it's like these tunnels are out there. And it's really interesting. Well, Dr. Greer, I know you're limited on time. I appreciate you coming on. We've been working for about a year to get you on. So thank you so much. I'm going to put all those links down below so that people can go check it out, be supportive.
And hey, anybody who wants to join me, we're going to be out in California. It's July 23rd to the 26th in Temecula, and it's open to the public. I think it's limited to 500 people, but we're going to have a whole weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, about this. And if you can't be there in person, we're going to have a webinar. So you put that link too, so people want to come and participate, they'll be welcome to come.
Okay, great. I will put that down below. Dr. Stephen Greer, thank you so much for coming on. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
You too. Thank you so much.